All right, welcome to this explainer. Ever wonder what really separates a decent manager from a truly legendary historical leader? Today, we're taking a fascinating journey that bridges the deeply personal internal world of spiritual philosophy with the massive, sweeping scale of global geopolitics. We're going to explore a framework that defines leadership through a very specific lens of love, wisdom, and the capacity of the soul, starting right inside the mind of an individual and rippling all the way out to the fate of nations.
Okay, let's dive right into this. The concepts we are unpacking today come directly from a really intriguing framework laid out in the book Power to Influence by Ryuho Okawa. We'll be objectively looking at how the text defines influence and leadership capacity. It's a highly structured approach, and we're going to break it down piece by piece.
So, here's our roadmap for today. 1. Enlightenment and the soul's capacity. 2. The 5 virtues. 3. Historical leaders. And 4. Japan's global role.
Section 1. Enlightenment and soul's capacity.
Now, before you can influence the world, you kind of have to sort out your own internal landscape, right? What's really interesting about this slide is how the author strictly separates pure knowledge from the messy, everyday reality of handling human beings. The text defines your level of enlightenment as your pure understanding of truth, but it contrasts that with your soul's capacity, which is essentially the breadth of your inner container. It dictates how many wildly different, diverse types of people you can actually accept and integrate.
The text establishes this fascinating dichotomy. The author points out that you could literally have two individuals with the exact same level of spiritual understanding, the same enlightenment, but they will have vastly different leadership potential if one of them has a larger soul's capacity.
Think of it like a giant puzzle. The author argues that someone with a really deep but narrow adherence to pure knowledge might actually hit a ceiling. Picture a monk completely isolated in a monastery, right? Incredible insight for sure, but toss them into the turbulent waves of modern society and they might really struggle to lead. On the flip side, a leader with a broad, accepting soul has way more potential for future growth because they can take in, manage, and uplift a vast array of different personalities without breaking.
Section 2. The 5 virtues as weapons. Let's see how this builds. Okay, so having a huge internal capacity is great, but how does a leader actually get things done? To do impactful work in society, the text brilliantly illustrates that a leader needs to acquire 5 specific virtues. And it doesn't treat these as just passive, nice-to-have morals. No, these are active weapons rooted in love and wisdom that you absolutely need to navigate the world. We're talking propriety, wisdom, trust, justice, and finally, courage.
And the author maps these out not as some random list, but as a strictly required sequence. You have to start with propriety, literally just having the basic manners and etiquette to be accepted by society. That gets your foot in the door. Then you gain wisdom through experience. That wisdom allows you to build trust and human networks. And with that solid network, you can establish justice, learning what is right and avoiding what is wrong.
So, the crucial point is captured right here in this warning from the text. The final virtue, courage, or action, absolutely has to come last. If you just jump in and act on raw bravery without first having propriety, wisdom, trust, and justice, according to the text, you aren't leading. You're actually just acting out of reckless self-preservation, and you become a literal danger to unready societies. Makes sense, right?
Moving on to Section 3. 3 criteria for historical leaders. Now that we've got the internal capacity and the external weapons defined, let's zoom our lens way out to the historical, macro level. How do we evaluate massive historical figures using this framework? Well, the source gives us a really fascinating comparative case study, putting American President Abraham Lincoln right alongside conquerors like Napoleon and Alexander the Great.
To judge them, the author introduces a strict 3-part test for true historical greatness. Step 1. Did the leader act with unselfish altruism, or were they secretly just serving their own ego? Step 2. Did their political and military actions genuinely contribute to building an ideal, better society? And step 3. What kind of spiritual legacy and mentality did they leave behind for future generations?
And here is how the author breaks it down. Lincoln, he passes all 3 metrics with flying colors. The text highlights his distinct lack of self-interest, fighting a grueling civil war just to prevent the nation from splitting and to correct the moral failure of slavery.
But in stark contrast, the text evaluates Napoleon and Alexander the Great as ultimately failing that altruism test. Sure, they accomplished massive feats, but the author argues their actions were deeply rooted in self-glorification, and the mentalities they left behind for posterity were spiritually negative compared to Lincoln's.
Finally, Section 4. The Multipolar Era and Japan's Role.
This brings us to the final widest lens of our explainer. Here, the source material suddenly pivots from analyzing the past to making some really specific predictions about international relations and shifting global power dynamics, reading the current flow of civilization to prescribe a path forward.
The author outlines a global framework characterized by some profound tension. On one side, the text points to the intense historical clashes between monotheistic cultures, specifically referencing frictions between Christian and Islamic spheres of influence. But contrasted against this rigid clash of absolutes, the author highlights Japan's historical background of polytheistic tolerance. It's a cultural soul's capacity that is inherently wired to be more accepting of diverse values.
So what does this all mean? Ultimately, the source concludes that in our current multipolar era, where absolute ideologies frequently collide, Japan is uniquely positioned to bridge these cultural divides. The author suggests Japan should leverage its inherent tolerance to play a middle-way leadership role, acting with diplomatic wisdom to maintain cooperative ties with the US, while simultaneously stepping up to help revitalize the wider Asian region.
We've literally traveled from the deepest inner workings of a single mind all the way out to the sprawling stage of global civilizations. Whether you're leading a small team or looking at the world stage, the framework we explored today asks a really demanding question. Pure understanding is vital, but without a broad, tolerant capacity to handle others, your influence hits a wall. So as you look at your own journey, which will you focus on cultivating first? Your strict understanding of the truth or the tolerant capacity of your soul? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I hope it gave you some incredible new perspectives to think about.